timeline of the OSA's published rules for at least the past 30 years. In 1988, from about around then, that's when we have it documented. We have, it's been the topic of discussion for since then at least. Back in 1992, the OSA went through a huge downsizing of the OSA bylaws because at one point all of the published rules, policies, and procedures were all combined into the OSA's bylaws. So at that time, they made the attempt to separate the bylaws from the member policies, which created a lot quicker AGMs because before that, everything that needed to be changed or discussed in terms of policies and procedures would have to go to the OSA AGM and would have to go through any kind of amendments to the bylaws. Then we had from 1988 to 2008, there were 4 failed attempts to try to fix the rules. Every time it came up at a board meeting, it was rejected and nothing ever really took place from there. Then in 2010, the board of directors decided to create a rules rewrite project and project committee to try to get this moving forward. From 2010 to 2014, there wasn't much progress that started, but in 2014, staff took control of the actual project, and there's been a lot more progress from 2014, early 2014 to present, as well as ongoing review of the OSA's rules. So the actual rules rewrite project in 2014, like I said, it started in January of 2014 with 3 main objectives. The first was to completely reduce the number of rules from the 600 plus pages that we had to something more manageable. It was also, the main objective was also to separate policies from operational procedures. We wanted policies to be more board-driven and what the board would have, the board of directors would have control over, whereas the operational procedures would all be managed by the OSA staff and go through, any kind of changes would go through the OSA staff and executive director. And we also wanted to overall review all of the rules for consistency and necessity. If there were duplications, if there were things that no longer needed to exist, we were looking for those type of issues and trying to resolve them. We put together a project team consisting of 2 staff members, one that has now retired. It was Bruce Henderson, and he kind of headed the project, followed by myself and then 2 district administrators. We have the input of subject matter groups, referred to as SMG. These subject matter groups would deal with each section of the operational procedures specifically. Any changes or adjustments to these operational procedures or additions would go through the subject matter groups. And then we would also engage focus groups for feedback and consultation, just to make sure that we're getting a well-rounded idea of how people are feeling about the current rules and operational procedures that we have in effect. So this is just a little bit of some information that I'm not sure if everyone has seen, but we at the OSA, we've kind of adjusted the way we're putting out communication to our membership in the form of OSA information bulletins. This particular information bulletin was specifically around the rules rewrite project and the new operational procedures that went into effect as of February 27th. This was sent to the district administrators for them to further disseminate to their membership. And it just went through the phases of the rules rewrite project, as well as the ongoing attempt to continuously or annually review the OSA's operational procedures and policies where necessary. The second page of this document highlighted a few of the big changes, the big ticket items that we felt district administrators, district associations, and clubs would need to know right off the bat rather than reading 200 pages of rules. So the first being the governing documents section. So we've completely changed how we develop and revise the OSA policies as well as the OSA operational procedures. The RTD process was completely deleted as a result of this rules rewrite project, but we have put something else in place, and all of that I will show you in a moment. And then any changes to the operational procedures would need to come through an operational procedure change request process, which is completely managed by the staff of the OSA rather than things going to the board of directors. Another big item was section 6, which is the registration section. So we've changed procedure 2.0 concerning the player registration effective date. So when it used to be that you would register on one day and you would be eligible to play the next day, that has now changed to the same day. So if you're registered on Monday, you are eligible to play Monday at that time of registration. Another issue was the amount of registrations that amateur players were allowed. So grassroots players U12 or U8 to U12 would only be allowed to register on one program with one club. Youth players had a maximum of 3 team registrations, only one of which was allowed to be competitive, so that hasn't changed. And senior players were, that's changed to unlimited teams, but only one competitive registration. We've had a little bit of terminology change as well. And the next big one was the residency rule that was in the registration policy or procedures as well. That has been deleted in its entirety. We have some new sections. The section 7, which is game types, is a new section. This is where you would find every single type of soccer played throughout Ontario, which would include beach soccer, futsal, indoor soccer, small-sided soccer, and grassroots soccer. So all of the procedures for those different types of soccer are in that section. And again, some terminology which has changed in terms of leagues. The levels have now changed to provincial, regional, district, and local. And we're now referring to referees as match officials. Those are a couple of the big ticket items that have changed. The next thing that I wanted to show you was where to find rules and policies and procedures on the OSA website. So everything is under the governing documents tab of the OSA website. If you scroll down, we have each of the types of documents that are available with a quick definition, and if you click the link, you'll be able to go to it. So we have the OSA bylaws, the OSA policies, which again have been, is all in the hands of the board of directors, and it's more of the high-level policies of the organization. And we have all the OSA operational procedures. If you click the link here, it will take you to the full document, the full 200-page PDF document. Otherwise, everything has been split up into sections for you. So you'll have the policies here on the left with the accompanying operational procedures, and then any kind of applicable documents that you might need here on the right side, which is also linked to each of these sections. So you just kind of go into one of them. The registration section. If you need to find anything, you can always hit your Control F to look for a specific term. All of the forms that you need are also in this document, so if you click that, it will bring you to the form right away. So those are a couple of the changes that are results of the rules rewrite project, and as I said, or as I mentioned, it is an ongoing process. We will be reviewing the rules as necessary if we have any issues and changing them if need be, but on a more annual basis, it will take place once a year where each of the subject matter groups will review each of their sections, and we will release any kind of changes that need to go out in the form of a information bulletin for our membership, as well as changes to this section of the website. So that's my part of this. I'm just going to give this back over to Matt so that we can move on with the rest of the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Sharon. I think having an awareness of the policies and procedures and where to find them is critical in that ability to be compliant to a certain extent, but to manage that risk so that we're doing the right thing and that we're going to keep on the right side of the insurers, if you like. So with that being said, I'm going to hand you over now to Alan, and Alan will talk us through the bulk of the presentation.
Thank you, Matt. I'm just going to load up here so you guys can see my screen. We're good to go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar entitled The Culture of Risk Management, an Introduction. This webinar will provide you with a general introduction into the concept of risk management in sport, but it's not designed to be sort of a full catch-all, as obviously different scenarios may require different risk treatment techniques. At the conclusion of this presentation, my contact information will be displayed, so please feel free to reach out to me with any questions related to such unique scenarios, and I'd be happy to help you guide you to the appropriate with the appropriate approach to manage your risk. So my name is Alan Hollingsworth. I have worked as the insurance broker for the Ontario Soccer Association for the past 10 years. I head up the sports and entertainment practice at Hub International. We work with a number of the larger provincial and national sports organizations. For this, on this particular presentation, I worked with Joe Proleg from our risk control team. So some of this information came from him and some from the experience that I've had in working with the various sports associations. So my screen seems to have frozen. There we go. Okay, so the presentation agenda, we're going to talk through a basic introduction to what risk management is. We'll talk about the risk management process. We'll look at prevention and response and how critical that is in the risk management process, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So introduction to risk management. Risk is defined in the business of amateur sports as the chance or potential of injury, damage, or loss. It extends to chance of an injury to a participant, patron, spectator, and or damage to a visitor's property. Risk management in the business of amateur sport is defined as reducing the chance of injury or property damage by measuring and controlling your risk. So if you look to avoid, reduce, and transfer, that's basically risk management. Risk management requires a number of things. Forward thinking, so looking to anticipate what a risk is and then preparing and dealing with them. Lateral thinking, which is searching for new and better approaches. And that's something that the OSA on a consistent basis is looking to do, as mentioned by some of the rule changes and some of the policies and procedures that have been rolled out. Responsible thinking, so risk management versus risky management, and that ties into sort of cutting corners, avoiding scenarios, and then balanced thinking, the balance between costs and expenses. Sometimes if there are expenses attached to the rollout of a risk management framework, and avoiding those processes to save on costs can end up hurting in the long run. The benefits to good risk management. It obviously looks to reduce the chance of costly and undesirable surprises. The brand impact. It improves the quality of the OSA's reputation, which can allow for future growth, long-term sustainability, the controlling of insurance premiums, which is very important as an organization. Can also help in coach, volunteer, and employee engagement. You'll have a more confident and willing group of leaders and managers if they feel that they're working for a good, solid organization that cares about risk and cares about its members. So the risk management process, the first thing to do is to identify what the risks are, so determine what a source of a risk is. Then you'll look to evaluate those risks. So what's the likelihood of something happening, and what are the consequences attached to that occurrence? Treating the risk. Do we avoid it completely? Do we choose to find ways to reduce it? Can we transfer it out, or can we accept it and sort of deal with the potential of the risk that's associated with accepting those risks? Implementing, this is very important. When you execute, you need to be consistent, and the consistency ties back to the policies and procedures that the organization has pushed down from the top down. This picture sort of illustrates a couple of things that to all of us on this call will probably look at and say, well, those are obvious, yet they clearly weren't obvious to those who are attending this kid's soccer game. So if we look here, you can see that the first arrow will point at the kid who's doing what he's supposed to do. He's chasing the player who's on the ball. Because his eyes are focused on catching the player on the ball, he's not seeing the foot that's sticking out beyond the white line here, or these feet that are out over the line and in play. This water bottle that's right on the line that a kid could clearly step on. Again, we've got a metal chair, so a kid falls, could seriously injure themselves just given the proximity of the chair to the sideline. Another foot that's very close to the sideline, and then a spectator who's actually not watching the game, who's watching a game on an adjacent field. All obvious, but yet not necessarily addressed in this particular game scenario. So the risk management process, addressing and treating risk. You can choose to just say no. We could choose to say, in that last example, spectators must be behind the netting at the back where there's dedicated seating area. You could look to reduce the risk by introducing a number of controls, policies, procedures. Again, these are the things that Sharon and Matt mentioned earlier. Administration, protective equipment in the running facilities. Some of you may have facilities that you own. A read receipt system. This is really important. When protocols and frameworks get rolled out and procedures get rolled out, they must flow through the system. So there's no point in the top layer of an association rolling something out if the next layer is not going to see it and pass it on to the layer that they're communicating with. So if we think in the model of the OSA, you've got the association rolling things out to the districts roll it out to the clubs roll it out to the teams roll it out to coaches, and then down to the players. So it's really important that there's a flow there. I've put in here, avoid the black hole, and that's a dangerous thing in a legal scenario if it turns out that, well, we just didn't know. Well, that's not going to help you in your defense. So the black hole is quite often where messaging can go, and it's up to everybody, regardless of what your role is within the organization, to ensure that that doesn't occur. Risk transfer through legal documents. So user contracts, when you're renting a facility, they're going to ask for proof of insurance. That comes through us. We issue certificates of insurance. That is a risk transfer technique. It's the venue, the facility, the field, the municipality, transferring the risk of injury back to the association. So user contracts, leases, waivers, which we'll talk about as we move forward, and warning signs. Again, if you own a facility, making sure that the appropriate warning signs are posted throughout the facility. So you've done everything you could do, and yet it still triggers a loss. So why could you be held liable? Well, basically, you're held liable if you fail to provide what's called duty of care to patrons. Duty of care is a legal obligation which is imposed on an individual or a company or an organization or an association requiring the adherence to a standard of reasonable care while performing acts that could foreseeably cause harm to others. It's codified by legislation in pretty much all jurisdictions. And what it says is the patrons must be provided with a safe and well-maintained environment. That all ties back to what's called the Occupier's Liability Act, and it reads as follows. An occupier of a premises owes a duty to take such care in that all circumstances of the case is reasonable to see that the persons that are entering the premises and the property brought onto the premises by those persons are safe while on the premise. So basically, that all in layman's terms means an occupier of a soccer pitch or field or facility is required to be provided with a reasonably playing surface for its intended use. That is tied specifically to venue-related losses. It expands beyond that with the coaching and such. So why you could be held liable? You failed to, for example, warn of a hazardous situation and properly protect spectators. You failed to provide appropriate response after an incident occurs. So there's no sort of an emergency action plan that has to go into place. There's no execution of the drafted policies and procedures that the OSA has rolled out to deal with certain scenarios. No access to security or medical staff or personnel on site. If that's sort of more ties to the likes of tournaments where you could have medics on site. Fail to maintain a facility, or you fail to conduct due diligence or background checks on coaches and volunteers. I do want to state that this is not intended to be an all-inclusive list, obviously, because each situation may provide different risk-specific scenarios. Again, my contact information is at the end of this presentation, and you're welcome to reach out to us for more information. So the OSA, the organization, buys insurance to protect against these legal scenarios. It's general liability coverage that is extended to cover sport-related exposures. So basically, as a coverage overview, sports liability insurance is separate or an endorsement to a general liability policy. It typically covers sanctioned or authorized events. So in the case of the OSA, it would be leagues, tournaments, camps, clinics, programs that are run by the organization. Coverage it's designed to include to provide defense for your legal liability for injury to participants, legal obligations to pay damages because of a bodily injury or property damage to a third party, or injuries to spectators, passerbys, property owners resulting from your operation or your actions related to the sport of soccer. So you've had a situation following an incident, certain things have to happen. Response and reaction to an incident is absolutely critical. Poor response or execution can turn a very simple situation into a very serious liability allegation. So after an incident occurs, and copies, I'm probably speaking very quickly through each one of these slides, so for those of you that are taking notes, my understanding is that this will be available after the webinar, so you don't have to write very fast here to try and keep up with me. But following an incident, basic steps that need to be followed. The first thing is to follow the procedures that are outlined again by the OSA. If I'm repeating myself, that's good. That means that you're hearing what I'm saying with regards to following through with the policies and procedures that are pushed down from the OSA. Very, very important. The minimum response procedure is to stabilize the scene. Nobody is expected to be a general surgeon, an open heart surgeon, fix up those that have been injured right there. But that's not what's expected of a reasonable person. What is expected is that you're going to stabilize the scene. You're going to provide sensitive and competent care, so being empathetic. I want to actually just hone in on this. So be empathetic, but let the courts decide negligence or liability. The admittance of, yes, we contributed to a loss is not something for you to decide. It's up for the courts to decide. So that's a very important point. I've got in here document written 3 times, document, document, document. I could probably write it another 100 times. It's really important that you get as much information around the scenario as possible. So witness statements. If there's a report that can get filed at the time, referee's report, anything you can get that can sort of help you long term if there was a serious injury that could turn into a lawsuit. So having that defense because it sometimes can be difficult to dig that information up many years later. And we'll see from the limitation period that people can file a claim, it can go on for many years. So it is really important that you document and get as many statements and be able to recreate the scene as best you possibly can, because it could happen many years later. Advise your head office. Let OSA know, let the districts know that there was a serious situation. Give them as much of that information as possible. Assist the claims adjuster. So the insurance company, when a claim gets filed, will reach out and try and find information out about the claim. They're on your side. Do ask who they are and who they're representing if you do get a phone call, because they could be representing the injured party. So it is important to find out who is calling you and what their sort of role in the scenario is. But do assist them. Give them as much of that information as possible, because they're going to be your they're there to help you in the allegations that have been sort of lobbied against you. Again, the importance of documentation, accident and incident reporting procedures, they're really essential parts to an effective risk management program. These reports are valuable because they capture complaints, accidents, and incidents before they become claims. So they really create the level, or the starting level of defense before it becomes a legal scenario. They can help, as I said, establish defense for claims that are presented many years later. They can serve as the basis for analyzing types, frequencies, locations that may need risk improvement. You know, I've seen scenarios where or coached in scenarios where fields weren't at a certain level, exposed sprinkler heads as an example, and they were always there, and no one did anything about it, and we just sort of play around it. Well, that can't happen, because if there's an injury and it's a known risk, that it's going to be very tough to defend against that. They can also help identify weaknesses in current risk management plans. As I mentioned earlier, this is sort of a general overview. Risk management as a focus learns and gets better each year, and each association that's tied to a risk management plan get better at the risk management process, and their framework expands yearly. So the documentation can help in growing the risk management focus or culture through an organization. So it's really important to have that and share that. So I talked about the limitation periods. The limitation period to file a claim here in Canada or in Ontario is 2 years from the date of the loss. For children, it's up to the age of majority, which is 18 years plus 2 years. We recommend that all files for participants, including waivers, be kept a minimum to the age of majority plus 2 years, because again, you never know when that claim could come out. So if you have a 10-year-old who's suffered a serious injury, they technically have another 10 years to actually file a claim, and it's not uncommon to see claims come through much later, because it obviously shows that whatever their injury they're suffering, it hasn't disappeared, or it's still an ongoing concern for the injured party. So, so policies and procedures, doing your due diligence. Again, when we talk about sort of having the availability of documentation following a claim, we need to be able to draw on a level of defense if there's been an injury sustained. So, and this is not a sort of a full-on catch-all, as I said, but this does help in the process. So, waivers and registration forms. Players must be registered in order to have insurance afforded to them under the OSA program. And part of the registration process has a waiver built in. Consistent enforcement of developed manuals and handbooks, and they must flow through each level within the structure. I mentioned that earlier. If there's a rollout of a policy or procedure for the OSA level, it gets rolled out to the district level. That must get rolled down to the club level, down to the teams, coaches, so on and so forth. Looking at scenarios that have been posted on the rules website with the OSA around emergency action plan related to specific scenarios. Training of officials, coaches, and volunteers, making sure that they're all following the same registration and training process, and then of course maintaining documentation, which I mentioned earlier. So waivers are contractual documents that prevent the signatory from exercising their right to sue for personal injuries in certain circumstances. The waiver needs to confirm that all of the activities undertaken by the organization are covered by the waiver form, so be it on-field or off-field, and that could be dressing rooms, weight rooms, transportation to and from venues. Here's an interesting stat. Between 1990 and 2007, over 1.6 million children and youth received emergency room treatment for unintentional sports-related injuries. So these injuries obviously do happen, and the legal environment is claims can get filed within the legal environment. So if a claim does get filed, how does it affect the insurance program? The members of the association pay the insurance premium ultimately. So if the average bodily injury settlement in the United States, in Canada, is between 30 and 50,000, which it is, and it's probably climbing, the average in the States could be much more than that. It's almost double. But we, in certain jurisdictions, are tracking closer to U.S. Quantum settlements. Frequency of incidents reported to insurers scare them. Reason being is it shows that there is a concern within the sport or within the organization that risk management is not a high priority. The culture of risk, as I like to sort of refer to it as, maybe isn't as good as it should be. Frequency of smaller claims will eventually lead to some larger claims. So it's important that the culture of risk is celebrated and exercised throughout the organization. Defense costs can be significant, even if allegations are without merit. Quite often, these claims can drag out in the legal environment for many, many years. So even if the settlement amount is low, as far as what the courts award the injured party, the defense costs that the insurance companies have can be quite significant. So why are these settlement amounts on the incline? Injured persons are seeking compensation for pain and suffering. They can claim more on pain and suffering now than what they were able to a couple of years ago. Loss of amenities, enjoyment of life, loss of income from future potential earnings. People are living longer, and that's another thing too. They're working longer, so the statement of claims, the quantum that an injured party pursues, they're higher because of these reasons. In some scenarios, claim scenarios, housekeeping and home maintenance is required. They require medical services in the future, including rehab and care, and then loss of companionship. So in conclusion, risk management, sort of 4 or 5 things that it requires. You need to assess a risk, you need to review the risk, control the risk, mitigate it, monitor it, and then execute it on a consistent basis. That sort of concludes my quick-ish presentation here. If you have any questions, Matt, I don't know if you want to jump back on and just to deal with the questions piece, or as I said, my email address is there for any questions that you may want to email through to me. Thank you, everybody.
Sure. That's great. Thank you very much, Alan. Fantastic. Always something new whenever I see that presentation. That always sends panic into me, but in a good way. Taking that back to the club environment and being aware of, risks that I may not have seen before, or just reinforcing the practice of what to do in the case of an accident, and following it through, and as you say, document to make sure that everything's in place should it need to go to court or a claim. If anybody has any questions, by all means, if you'd like to type your question into the chat box. I'm not seeing any just yet. So you might have got away lightly tonight, Alan, if you're lucky.
Okay.
If we don't have any, that's absolutely fine. Alan's provided his email contact there. You're also more than welcome to contact myself, or probably more specifically Sharon at this time at the OSA, and we can take your questions. And as I said, we will provide those back in an FAQ document, I believe. Do you still have one on the HKMB Hub website, Alan?
Yes, yeah.
Great. And I know that in previous presentations has answered a lot of people's questions about what to do in a certain situation, or licensing at an event, and a number of scenarios that we'd see in a typical club environment.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, Matt, for those of you on the call that aren't aware, we have a dedicated page to the OSA on the insurance program and on FAQs related to exposure and that sort of thing. So if you link through the OSA's website on the insurance tab, it'll bring you into our website, and you can find out some more information there.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, we seem to be quiet on the questions, so let's wrap it up for this session. Thank you very much again, Alan, for your time.
My pleasure.
Very much appreciated, and also to Sharon. I think she's still on the line, but probably checking emails. The girl's a workaholic. So thank you very much to the two of you for your presentation. That's been great, very informative. And please look out for our next webinar in late May, which will revisit the social media presentation that we had at the recent soccer development conference. We'll also make the slides available for download on the OSA website under the club section. We have a webinar area there where all of our webinars will be catalogued, and we'll put the slides there as well so that you can download them there and share them with your boards. Thank you, Larry, for that question. Okay, with that being said, have a great evening, and hopefully we'll see you out on the field this summer. Take care.